Welcome to week 2 of the Art and Science of Drawing. This week we're going to talk about dynamic mark making. In week 1, we learned that masters use incredibly light lines to lay a foundation of basic shapes and forms that they'll build the rest of their drawing on top of. This basic foundation of light lines is never intended to be seen by a viewer. It's simply there to provide a scaffolding for the artist to build the more dynamic and expressive marks on top of. This week, we're going to explore how to make these kinds of dynamic marks. Looking at a drawing up close is like looking at a piece of abstract expressionist art. A drawing is made up of hundreds, if not thousands, of individual marks and lines. When we're up this close to the surface of a drawing, it's difficult to tell what subjects and forms these marks and lines will describe. Here, the mark making takes on a life of its own, telling a story that goes far beyond representation. Each individual line is an opportunity to communicate something to the viewer. And just like spoken language, how you're saying something is just as important as what you're saying. The masters took every opportunity they could to vary the kinds of lines they were making. They constantly explored and experimented. In master drawings, we find that even out of context, the individual lines and marks stand on their own as beautiful forms of expression. It's only when we pull back that the lines begin to work together to create the illusion of recognizable form. There's a moment when these abstract marks coalesce into hair, fabric, and skin. By varying the quality of our lines, we can express a wide range of emotions and ideas. You see, every line has a minimum of 2 functions. The first is to communicate some kind of recognizable form. The second is to communicate an idea or an emotion. Every line is an opportunity to express an opinion, belief, philosophy, or feeling about your subject. A good drawing doesn't just tell us what something looks like. It gives us an idea of what something feels like. This feeling could be tactile, like fur or flesh, or it could be something more emotional. Good mark making can tell us something about the human experience. It can begin to convey the swirling complexity of thoughts and emotions that occur during some of life's most charged moments. I think of every individual line like a letter. Just like in language, letters come together to form words. Words come together to form sentences. Sentences form paragraphs until eventually we get an idea of what the entire story is. The line is the smallest unit of a drawing, and in fact, a drawing is made up of hundreds, if not thousands, of individual marks and lines. And as I mentioned in the introduction, each line you're going to put down is going to serve a minimum of 2 purposes. The first is that the line needs to describe the form that you're drawing. Whatever that subject is, it needs to give you an idea of what the form actually is. But the second thing is it needs to express something about the subject that you're drawing. This is an opportunity for you to give an opinion, an idea, a belief, or an emotion about the subject that you're drawing. What most people don't realize is that how you're making your lines says more about you as an artist than what you're drawing. And most people don't give a whole lot of thought into what their lines are saying about them. Remember, your lines are communicating your thoughts and emotions about your subject, whether you are intending them to or not. So what we're going to do this week is really give you a sense of how to communicate with your viewer in a way that really expresses your thoughts and feelings about the subject. So I'm going to start off by giving you a very simple definition of what a line is. I like to define a line as any pathway that the eye can follow. What I like about this definition is it leaves open a wide range of possibilities and interpretations of what a line is and what it can do. This definition of line is important because it allows us to state lines that are continuous, but it also allows us to imply lines and to be able to pull the viewer's eye around the page. Here's an example of a continuous line that curves along from one side of the page to the other. This gives us an obvious pathway for the eye to follow. Let's explore two other ways to provide this path without a continuous line. Now, at the bottom of the screen, you'll see about a few dozen vertical lines. Each vertical line is at a different height. The way the vertical lines are spaced allows us to easily ignore individual lines and instead focus on the same pathway that our continuous line made. This is called an implied line. It gives our eyes the same pathway to follow without the actual continuous line being present. Here's one more variation on the same implied line. Each of these three variations provides our eyes with the same pathway to follow. So now that we have a definition for what a line is, next we need to talk about how people relate to and interpret lines. Now, because every drawing is made up of hundreds, if not thousands, of individual lines, the first thing I want to do is just really simplify this to see how we react to a single line, to the single unit that we're going to find over and over and over in our drawings. When we as humans see a line, we empathize with it. We tend to anthropomorphize it, which means we project our thoughts and emotions onto it and treat it almost as if it were a living thing. So how a line is made, how fast it was made, the kind of quality it has, all tend to give us an idea and a sense of emotion about that line. The emotional states that we are feeling and we are expressing through our line work can be picked up by a viewer. And it's important to remember, you can't help but express something through your line work. So again, what we want to do today is get some control over that, to be aware of what we're broadcasting to a viewer, and to see if we can use lines to express the ideas and emotions that we want. A great way to get a sense of how we as humans interpret lines is to ask yourself when you see a line, if this line were a person, what would he or she be doing? Don't overthink it. If this line were a person, the person would be standing. Vertical lines tend to have an upright, assertive quality to them. They're stable, but they're strong. If a horizontal line were a person, this person would be laying down. We tend to feel more stable and calm while looking at horizontal lines. They're balanced, and they seem safer and somehow less confrontational than vertical lines. Oblique angles are where things get interesting. Remember, an oblique angle is any angle that isn't a horizontal or vertical. In the studio, when students are asked what this oblique line would be doing if it were a person, they tend to give very different answers. To some viewers, oblique angles are exciting, dynamic, and engaging. They're a welcome change to the rigid and safe quality that horizontals and verticals have. These students tend to give answers like running, flying, leaping, moving, and sliding. For others, the unbalanced nature of obliques are unstable, disturbing, unsettling, and even seem dangerous. These students tend to give answers like falling, keeling over, tripping, and tumbling. While verticals and horizontals suggest order, balance, and predictability, obliques add an element of unpredictability, of chaos. But it's this unpredictability that can add excitement and dynamism to a drawing. Remember, there's no one right way to interpret any of these lines, but we do want to get a sense of how viewers might react to them in our drawings. Now that you have a definition of line, and a sense of how viewers are going to interpret them, let's practice making different kinds of lines. The materials you're going to see me using today are very, very simple. You'll still see me working with 18 by 24 inch paper and a black pencil. But remember, I'm not encouraging any particular kind of media. You can use a ballpoint pen, you can use pen and ink, you can use charcoal or Conte crayon. Remember, the kind of media you're using isn't nearly as important as how you're using it. It's the techniques and concepts that you're bringing to the drawing board that's really going to show what you're all about as an artist. The ever-changing line, which is going to be part of your project today, will give you an opportunity to explore multiple different kinds of lines. The directions are simple. You're going to draw one continuous line that changes every few inches. This line can wind around the page however you like. In this demonstration, you'll see me primarily using the overhand grip. Remember, the overhand grip, which we introduced in week 1, allows us to engage not just the tip, but the side of the pencil as well. Unlike the tripod grip, the overhand grip allows us to make soft, hazy marks with the full side of the pencil, but also allows us to immediately shift to razor-sharp lines using the tip. During this project, you should really try and push your pencil to its limits. See how dark it can go. Get a sense of what it's like to use the full side of the pencil, and then see what just using part of the side is like. Push yourself to discover as many new kinds of mark making as you can. Experiment with pressure, how hard you're pushing down on the pencil. Experiment with different ways of moving your hand and arm. Even though I've asked you to draw a continuous line, don't forget how we're defining line, any pathway that the eye can follow. This means that you can have individual marks as long as the eye can follow them along the path. Here you'll see me rolling the pencil back and forth between my fingers. Next, you'll see me grinding the tip of the pencil into the paper before softly lifting it up. Notice that my pencil is constantly shifting directions. Remember, there's no wrong way to do this project. You're welcome to copy some of the techniques you see me doing here, but I encourage you to experiment. I've done this project dozens, if not hundreds of times, and each and every time I challenge myself to find some new form of mark making. Some of the ways I've experimented include throwing the pencil at the page from a good 10 to 15 feet away, using my non-dominant hand to make marks, and, with a pencil in each hand, playing the piece of paper as if it were a drum set, tapping and banging the pencils onto the page. Not everything you try is going to make an interesting line or mark, but this kind of experimentation is critical to be able to see what the pencil can actually do. Even though I'm encouraging you to use the overhand grip for most of the drawing process, the tripod grip, or any other grip you can think of, is certainly not off limits when experimenting with line quality. Even though the tripod grip doesn't allow us to engage the side of the pencil, which makes it challenging to make soft lines, we can still modify the pressure we're pushing down with, the speed at which we're making our lines, as well as hand and arm movements. If you ever need to bear down on the tip of the pencil to truly push it to its darkest limits, nothing beats the tripod grip. While drawing dark, you're much less likely to break the tip of the pencil while using the tripod grip than the overhand grip. That being said, one thing I often tell students in the studio is that if you don't break your pencil at least once during this project, you're not pushing the pencil hard enough. One of the best ways to test any medium is to push it past its limits. You can also try using the tripod grip further back from the pencil's tip. This makes it easier to get lighter lines. During this project, try not to worry about what these lines might be used for in a representational drawing. Right now, the goal is to generate as many different kinds of lines as possible, and to start to think about what these lines might communicate to a viewer. Try and begin to sensitize yourself to how a viewer might interpret these emotionally. Does a particular line seem more confident than another? Do you find a particular line to be more beautiful than another? Are there any that you simply do not like? Every line is open to interpretation. And while we'll never be able to fully control a viewer's response to a line, we as artists have far more control over our viewers' emotional response to our drawings than we realize. One of my favorite metaphors for line quality is tone of voice. Again, how we say something is often more important than what we're saying. Ask yourself, what adjectives related to tone of voice could be used to describe these lines? Do some lines seem to yell while others seem to whisper? Do some lines seem softer while others seem more aggressive? The goal of this project is to begin to explore the infinite range of marks your pencil can make, and to realize that every one of these different lines and marks has their own character that communicates something to the viewer. The larger your vocabulary of different lines and marks you have, the more opportunities for expression you'll have in your drawings. Your project today is simple. Using 18 by 24 inch paper, I want you to make 3 different ever-changing line pages. Remember, you can explore line in as many different ways as you can think of. Don't limit yourself. Really play around. And also, you can switch up media as well. I'm using a black pencil, but you can use anything you have around to make a mark. Once you've done your ever-changing lines, what I'd like you to do is select anywhere between 3 and 6 of the lines that you like. And you can like them for any reason at all. And I'd like you to practice replicating them on a page. How you're seeing me do this is I've taken a page, I've lightly drawn some straight lines that are going to provide the path for the eye to follow, and then over that I've put on the darker line, practicing being able to reproduce a line that I find interesting. Well, thank you so much for joining me here on the first day of week 2 dynamic mark making, and I look forward to seeing you again on day 2.